Hi, Michael.
Hey, buddy. Good to see you.
Yeah. How's the weather up there?
Today is absolutely beautiful.
I'll
We've
bet. I'll bet,
had a
man.
lot of rain and a lot of hail for the last 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
But today is, oh my goodness, amazing.
Yeah. I was talking, we got a bunch of people watching us from Victoria, and they said they had a lot of hail and snow and everything. Well, a little bit of wind too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's great. There's Aaron.
Yeah. Mr. Aaron, good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, you are muted.
That's my first time using Zoom.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to Zoom.
There you go. There you go.
Do you remember in the beginning of the pandemic when Zoom was new to so many of us, and yeah, how often that would happen? You're muted. I can't hear you.
That's right.
Oh, Mike, we had so many glitches. I didn't know about the waiting rooms or
Oh, yeah.
security.
Yep.
I think I told you the story, Michael. We came in here one time and two guys in one meeting. We had like 4 or 5 of us. Two guys showed up with no clothes on.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Come
I
on,
think that's
man. Come on.
From the outside, that's a crack up, but I don't know.
said, come,
Yeah.
I said, come on. But geez. Oh,
Well,
my goodness.
maybe they were like Ezekiel.
There you go. There you go, man. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Oh, Lord. Oh, my goodness.
hey, just a real quick question to both of you guys, since you're located where you are. I need some help with the Dinuba property. What I technically need is, so we got a weed and rubbish abatement request from the city. And so I just need somebody to help on the ground go get that problem solved for me. So if either of you would be willing to take that on, let me know. We can maybe via text or email kind of chat that up afterwards. But just I wanted to get that out there. I reached out to one person. They weren't able to do so, but if either of you could, we're going to need to get that taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to see the schedule.
Good to see you, my friend.
There's
All right, guys. Well, let's share some celebrations. I'll give a goofy one to start off with. If you notice all that grass back behind me.
Yeah, I do.
There's a road, and that little road is just the driveway. So on the other side of it, that's pasture. So I don't have to mow that. But all of that grass in front of me and so many other patches have had to be mowed. So now officially, last night, I finished every one of the patches last night for this week.
Do you have a riding mower, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's another one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, hopefully you're not using a push mower. That would really suck.
It would be horrible. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, man. Man, you're really getting into it out there. You're getting the real farmer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Muck boots all the time because it's just so wet, you know?
Yeah.
You can't wear, I mean, I can wear my shoes, but if I'm going to walk across much grass, they're going to be loaded with water real soon.
Yeah, exactly.
So how much land do you have there?
It's 20 or just under 20 acres.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's not all green like that, is it, Michael? You have to cut. Okay.
Oh, but I mean, mowable grass, I probably have, man, maybe between 2 and 3 acres of mowable grass.
Quite a bit, man. Yeah.
That's quite a bit. And then, I've got probably 10 to 11, maybe even 12 acres of woods. And so that's nice. I don't really have to do as much maintenance on that. There's going to be more clearing that we want to do. We've got a lot of trails through it that the dogs walk on and that are just beautiful trails to walk. And so we'll probably develop some more back in there. And then it's got a few natural springs. We thought there was only one natural spring, but I think there's actually 4 natural springs on the property. So
wow.
Yeah, pretty sweet.
Is that the behind you, Mike? Is that the coast right behind you? Is that the ocean?
No, that's the river. So that's right. That's Coquille River, but I'm about 1.5 miles from the ocean. So the mouth of the Coquille opens up to the ocean just about 1.5 miles.
Right. That's pretty cool, man.
I love it. You guys have got to come see it and make a trip. Come see the coast, man. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, somebody else. Celebration.
I got all my retirement stuff from Canada figured out. They're actually going to start paying me at the end of this month. So it's actually done. So I
Nice.
went through,
Congratulations.
yeah, so that's kind of nice. It helps offset some of the Medicare bills I got down here because I didn't, I messed Medicare up did badly down here, how that's supposed to happen. So that'll happen. So it's, they're going to send it down here. It has to go through, it's going to be direct deposit. So I lose, it's only 82 cents on the dollar right now, or 81.5 or something like that. So I lose a little bit on that, but it still pays for the bills that I don't have to pay anymore. So that'll be great.
So is that both CPP and old age
Yeah.
security?
Yeah. In fact, the CPP, Lloyd, because I waited, I'm 67. I didn't take it right away. They're going to give me a full check for $14,000 because it's a 2-year amount, right? So that's just the CPP part. And then the OAS is almost $800. So
Yeah, good.
top of that. So that'll be great. It's not a lot, but it's, it'll be 14
Well,
or
it helps.
1500
Yeah.
14 or 1500 a month helps. That pays some of the stuff that we need to pay that we haven't been able to. That'll be great. So,
Excellent.
if I would have stayed in Canada and worked an extra 20 years, I would have obviously gotten more, but I didn't. So, yeah, so that's great. So you guys need to, Aaron, and I don't know about Lloyd, if you've done that yet. You can do that too. Obviously, you just got to start it up, and I had to really actually go in and reactivate my my SIN number because they cancel it, or not cancel it. They deactivate it if it hasn't been used or accessed for 5 years. They deactivate it so people can't hack it. Hacking going on. So you have to go in and activate it again, and that got everything, the ball rolling. But that was quite a process in itself. I had to send a lot of proof of who I was and why I moved to the United States. Yeah, so you had to give them a whole excuse why. And so I said, well, just look, K1 visa, how's that? Just went through and that whole mess. So, but the good part is like I said, I have citizenship here in the United States, but I also have citizenship in Canada. Like Lloyd, you know how that works. They don't really take it from you. They don't ask it, but they don't ask you for it either. So, and it works out, and so that's great. So you actually do have dual citizenship.
Nice. Pastor Malcolm, I have good news for you. Today is Good Friday, and Jesus paid the price for all of our sin numbers. So you don't.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, man. Yeah, that's what it's called in Canada. It's a SIN number. Exactly, man. Yeah. Like I tell people down here, it's just my SIN number is 912-754. You know the whole thing. SIN number? What are you talking about? SSI. So,
Hey, Aaron, give us a celebration, buddy.
So for around 45 days, I've been on this crazy carnivore diet. So it's nothing but meat and dairy. That's it. So that's been going really good. Working out every day as well. And I just, one of the biggest things I noticed right away was that I was able to think a lot clearer, and my memory was sharper. And so, yeah, that's kind of a silly thing, but I'm celebrating that. And yeah, my health has improved dramatically, and it's been great.
That's awesome. Good stuff. And it sounds like such a fun diet too at that.
Yeah,
it is. And it's crazy because you get so much protein, so you don't need to eat as much. One thing I noticed, I'm drinking tons of water now. I don't drink any coffee anymore, and haven't had sugar, and I don't think I'll ever go back to having sugar. Because if you go off sugar and then you go back on it, you get pretty sick. And I'm thinking, if it makes you sick, then you should probably not do it. So we'll see.
Made me sick, Aaron. I mean, I got diabetes. I haven't been near sugar for 25 years. Stay away from it. But yeah, same thing. Like I went through the same thing that you're doing. I had to go on the diet as well because just for numbers said so. So, and I started out, the heaviest I'd ever been in my life. I couldn't walk 25 feet without having to sit down and take a break. I couldn't breathe.
Good.
And you're right, Aaron, so much better when you change, get what you're doing. I just feel so much better now. I've lost I'm just about 4 pounds under 100 pounds I've lost now.
Wow.
Nice.
So how come that's amazing?
I started out, this is bad. I'm going to tell you, I started out at 372 pounds. I'm at 274, 275 now.
There you go.
Congratulations.
And I want to get down to about 210. That's what I'm like, 210, 215 in that area.
That's great.
And so anyway, like Aaron was saying, me and Aaron had talked about this a few weeks ago too. It's the same thing. It's just a matter of And remember, Aaron, we were talking about discipline. I think we brought that up last week too, about in churches about being disciplined and all that. It's something that you have to work on. It's not something that comes naturally to us. It just doesn't. We fight it all the time. Discipline is not something we're very good at.
Yeah.
And sometimes it has to be inbred in us, or just you have to focus. Once I get going on it, I'm fine. In fact, I become very almost militant in that way, to the point that people don't like me sometimes, because I become so militant in that regard that this is who I'm got to be if I'm going to be successful. And I don't know if you guys have ever gone through that in your life, where you have something that this is just the way it has to be done for my purpose, because otherwise I can't. It doesn't work for me. Lord, I'm sure you got through that yourself, in that sense that, and we were talking, like I said, we are talking about it last week about the same thing in churches. How do you discipline or encourage people to a discipline of life, a certain way of life? And some people, they will fight that. They will struggle with that. And so I remember some of the questions that Lloyd had given us, and I was looking at, how do I do that? How do I tell people that there's a point in their life that they really have to, what they're reading and what they're understanding of being obedient to God, what exactly that means. And so I think, Aaron, you and I had talked about that. It's not always easy to encourage people. People will struggle and fight against that all the time, and they will. Yeah. And it's something, I guess we got to be more encouraging in that fact that there's something good at the end of all that comes through it.
Well, with that,
as will Aaron's testimony, exactly.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's hand it over to Lloyd. Lloyd, take it away. Bring some discipline into our lives.
Very well. Can I share a good news story too?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, Michael, you know this already, but we finally got a house after 12 different offers that we placed at different homes. So we finally nailed one down, and we're in escrow, and we're just praying that everything works out smoothly, but so far it looks really good. So we're excited that we finally have that in place. So that is good news. That is
right on.
News. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we could have stayed with our kids or something, but that would have really sucked. I mean, short term, that would have been okay, but
yeah.
Anyways, good. Well, hey, good to be here. Hopefully we didn't scare too many people off last week, but I know there's a lot going on. This is a busy week for pastors as well, so totally get that. Are these being recorded? Yeah, these are being recorded. And are you posting these somewhere, Michael?
Yes, we are. And then I need to apologize. I actually intended to post last week's, and so I got it up, but I did not send out my follow-up email. So when I send up the follow-up email, all of the recordings will be there for everybody.
Okay. Good. Yeah, that way people who want to keep up with this have a way of doing that. Great. Hey, let's just take a moment to pray, and then we can dig into our discussion this morning. Lord, thank you so much for these guys who have taken time out of their busy lives to come here to share, learn, explore, ponder, struggle, whatever it might be. And I just pray, God, that through this next hour that our discussions will be fruitful, not just to engage our minds, but our hearts and our souls as well, as we desire to serve you and make a difference in this world for your kingdom. Guide our time together, we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Good stuff. Well, we're a small group here, and so we might be able to whistle through this, maybe even faster than normal. Let's just take some time to reflect a little bit on last time. We focused on the decentralized leader, and my case that I was trying to make is that it really starts with leadership. Who are we? And again, we want to get into the mechanical side of all of this. We want to be able to, you want me to give you the 10 tips, do these 10 things, implement them, and life will be grand. Well, it's not quite that simple. We have to start with ourselves, and we're going to get definitely into some more practical stuff. I think next week in particular, we'll go back to the discussion, and we'll spend at least a couple, if not 2 or 3 weeks, on the whole thing of proxemics and space sizes and all that, and work through that on a much slower pace and give you guys some time to really work that through for your own context. But today, we will, we're going to do something. This is going to be a little more practical, but just more, we're going to get into more the decentralization stuff itself and kind of talk through that and so forth. But before we do, let me get my, I'm going to have to share my screen here. Before I do that, I'll just get my slides lined up properly. I had them and then I closed it, and now I got to reopen it here. Okay, there we go. I think we can do it now. Okay. Okay, that should work. Okay, so let's take some time and reflect on some of the questions I had given you last time. And, I don't know if you took this seriously or if you did it, spent a lot of time on it and whatever, but let's just talk about this a little bit. How dependent is your congregation on you for discipleship and care? So I don't know. I mean, again, we're a small group here, and nobody else is listening except people who might watch this later. But have you thought about that? What type of personal reflection did you come up with looking at your involvement? And I specifically said discipleship and care because those tend to be the areas that pastors are supposed to be spending a lot of time on. And your congregation probably depends on those things from you. So the question is, how dependent are they on you for those two particular items? So anybody want to share any thoughts, observations?
Yeah, when I was reflecting on that first question, the church's character is pastoral. So they want me to be accessible, which I am. But there isn't a high demand when it comes to the discipleship and the care aspect.
Oh, okay.
Where I see more of a high demand is more in the apostle evangelist sort of gift set, or more of a need, I think, right now. So yeah,
so Aaron, how would the play that out a little bit more? What give me an example of what the expectation might be for apostleship / evangelism?
Yeah, so it's an older congregation, so they want to see new people in there, right? And they're a mature congregation too.
So depending on you for growth.
Yeah, I think so, and because they don't know how to do it, because everyone who did know how to do it left, right? And they got into a sort of a management style for a number of years, and so I think that's more of the attitude of the church.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's a good observation. I guess I could have put that in there as well. Yeah, I think you're right. We have often even in terms of you look at the evangelism piece specifically. I mean, if you look at apostleship generally, and I mean they are distinct gifts, but they tie in to a certain degree. But apostleship also is a lot of it is leadership and vision and where you're directing your people. But the evangelism piece, I see that too, because many people in our congregations do not feel that they have the competency to evangelize. So it's, well, bring them to church, let our pastor preach at them, and that'll evangelize them. Yeah, that's good.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly what goes on here. What Aaron is saying is very similar to what's going on here, though it has been for years. You know that when you were here. We were at the same time when Lloyd was here, and then a little bit after that, we were an older congregation. And one of the things I would, see that with other churches that are going through, they're about 10 to 12 years behind us. And I see the thing, you got to be careful of that, because what happens is the older congregation eventually, they pass on, they go, and you're left with, not a shell of what was left. In fact, the people that we have left now weren't even here when Lloyd was here. They're not. Most of them are that were here then are either passed on or they're in nursing homes, or they just can't make it to church anymore, and that's a fact. And so, and you're right, Aaron. A lot of them look to now towards, well, we'll bring people, we'll bring up like families now. We'll bring these. I'll bring my kids in to see if the pastor can, encourage them to come to church. And it's like, let's let the pastor do it. And I think, man, it's just, well then, and like I said, it's maybe at the time, and I always questioned myself, maybe I wasn't the person that should have been here in that place, in that sense. I've just carried on the church to a point where it's like, I feel more like a manager than I do like a pastor. Sometimes I just feel like I'm the manager, I'm the head CEO or whatever of the church. And and I think, man, that's not really what I'm supposed to. I don't want to be that at all. But I think I've done that because there was nobody else willing to step into those positions. And so I did it, took it over, and just did it just in order for the church to continue doing what they wanted to have here. And it is like Aaron says, just they wanted to continue the church in the older way, and the way it should have, that they know how it should be run. And the whole idea, like I was telling you before, about changing things and doing things, it's very difficult sometimes with the older congregation to do that. They don't want to change a whole lot. They want to do the things that they've always known to work. And I said, well, they did work at one time, but the younger people today, they're just not willing to really, I find they're just not, they're not willing to fall into that program at all whatsoever. So, and they avoid it at all costs. It's not what they want. They want to see that. So the difficulty is sometimes, to me, is finding out where and how. Is my congregation dependent on me? Yeah, I believe they are, almost to a fault. They are. Yeah. Like I told you last week, if I decided to step down and quit now and just go that this church that'd be it. It'd be over. And I believe that, because I don't think they have any interest in looking for another path. That's sad. That's sad.
Yeah. But it is a reality. And I guess, hey, look at it this way. It's not unique to
right.
Hanford or anywhere else. I mean, this is a common thing that has pervaded the church in North America in particular. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate the honesty with that. And we'll, hopefully as we go through this, we'll give you maybe some strategies that will help you be able to release some of that. And that would be really, really helpful. But let's go on to the next question. How much of your identity, now and this might be more difficult, and if you're not comfortable talking about this, you don't have to, but it was a question I at least asked you to reflect on. How much of your identity is based on your need to be at the center? And let me share a personal story. So, you guys can share if you want. You can do your own thing, but I think I may have said this last week. If I believe I said this. I say this a lot, so I'm not sure if I actually said it here, but I think sometimes people enter into pastoral ministry because there's some personal stuff in their own life that they've been struggling through, and certainly the church probably made a difference in their life, etc. But sometimes I've seen people who have entered into pastoral ministry, often it has been to a big driving force. I don't want to deny the fact that there hasn't been some calling, or it's never this simple. But I do believe that there are some people that are still working through identity issues in their own personal life, and they're looking for what pastoral ministry offers as a way to help them come to terms with that, and to help them identify where they really stand and what, where they're really at, and trying to, they're using their ministry as their own discipleship process. And that, I mean, that's just fraught with a lot of danger, so to speak. But so anyways, out of my own experience in that, I had to come to terms with that personally, even though I believe that I didn't enter ministry with those motives in mind. I've always, even as a teenager within the church, I grew up in a church that really fostered a lot of development of younger people. And out of our congregation, which is not a terribly large church, or at least it isn't today, at that point, it was just, probably 100 to 150 size, so it's like not super small, but not a big church by any stretch of the imagination. But out of that church have come amazing number of leaders, some who are serving the church in different parts of the world today, because that church really honored and developed young people in a very healthy, organic manner, not just by having a good youth program, but by the congregation really honoring and mentoring youth. And so that was part of my story. And so that was really a big piece of it. But I also know that I carried with me, and part of my my impetus in going into ministry came out of that really positive experience, which is just really good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But I guess here's the point in this, is that in my church growing up, I was honored, I was respected, I was given positions of leadership. And I assumed that would be the case everywhere I would go, and that the respect for leadership, and not just as when I was a teenager, but even when I was older, that same culture would be there. And it was difficult at times when I didn't receive honor, respect, appreciation for my youth. I mean, even though I was maybe a teenager, but even as a 20 something, there were times where I was like, man, do you guys really, do you care? I mean, do you really honor and care for me? And so I had to work through some identity stuff because I had such a positive experience. Then when the road was rougher, it really made me delve deeper into, man, why am I doing this? Am I even cut out for this? And so as far as the whole decentralization piece of it, I had a lot of confidence coming out of my youth experience growing up in the church. And so it was easy being a pastor then to have a lot of confidence and to feel like I was invincible and I could do anything or everything. And when I was working in churches where I was just a paid worker to accomplish certain tasks, it hit me because I wasn't really then the pastor at the center that I thought I was going to be. And so, I mean, my story is different, but these are some identity things that I've had to work through. And I mean, in the end, I'm very thankful that I had a very positive start to all of this, but it doesn't always work out that way. Anyways, anybody else want to just share? I mean, if you do, great. If not, we can move on, but I wanted you to at least be thinking about that.
I had to, mine was of course, my situation was a little different here, Lloyd. As you know, I came in as they brought me in as a head of a search committee. I'd been going to church for about a year and a half when you guys came here. That's all I've been that's my church experience. That was it. And they put me as the head of a search committee for a new pastor. And thank goodness for Roger to carry me through that time. And my thing is, it's been a long process for me. And Denise would be real happy right now that I said the word process and not process. It's just a very, very Canadian thing to say. And but I said to her, I said, I was asking her, I said, here's the question that Lloyd wants me to ask. And he says, it might be tough for some of us. And she says, well, she said, you've had to learn how to be at the center. Because you didn't want to be at the center at all. I said, no, I didn't. And so in a way, to be the center, but not to be a dictator at the center either. You can't, you got to be, because you got to learn. It's not like the same thing as running a McDonald's or something like that or whatever. It's a little bit different. And so how much is, it goes back to the first question too, the discipleship and care. That's that's part of being at the center. Yeah. Because once again, and how far do you go with that at being at the center? So it's based on your need. Do I need to be at the center? No, I'd rather not be, to tell you the truth. But sometimes, Lloyd, I think sometimes I put myself there because, like I said last week, I feel like if I don't do it, it won't get done. So I put myself at the center of everything because I'm very impatient, I think, sometimes, and I can't. If I wait for other people to do it, then it's not going to get done. I got to get this finished. I want to get this done now. I don't want to wait that length of time to do something. So I do put myself at the center in that sense that, okay, let's get this done. I'll do it and I'll take care of it. And in that sense, like I said, I think Michael and I have talked about this. I've sort of spoiled this church in a way that they say, well, Malcolm. And so that's my worry and I see that with other pastors, the younger pastors. I said, if you put yourself at the center too far into that, then you'll get the kind of church that they're expecting you to do it. You do it. You go right ahead. It's up to you do it. And so that's it's something that I see that, and then I'm aware of that. I do not want to be at the center whatsoever. Right. I'd rather not.
Yeah. Well, that may be an advantage for you. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I'm not being disciplined with my relationship with Christ, then my identity starts becoming more about the center when it comes to ministry and those sorts of things. Not out of like a sense of prestige or accolades or any of that, more out of a sense of worry, stress. The work has to get done and those sorts of things. So when Christ first called me, I was about 19 years old, and I could see myself preaching. I'd never dreamt I'd ever preach or do anything like that. And I would go to church and I would see what people are doing, and I would think I could do that. And I had a great desire in me to do that. But never to show off, or never to have it as something to gain respect or any of those sorts of things. It was just, there was a calling in my life and there was a deep desire to do it. It wasn't until I got into ministry when that center thing became an issue, and it became such an issue, like I said, more out of stress than anything else. And so I noticed when I'm doing well with my spiritual disciplines, when I'm keeping Christ at the forefront, then that's not an issue at all. And when the issues do come up, it's okay. It just rolls right off. It's not a big deal. When different frustrations or whatever come up, it's not a big deal because my identity isn't found in what I'm doing, but it's found in who I am in Christ. Yeah. So, I was really thinking about that question. I thought that was a great question. And I believe one of the issues that I've had in the past, and others as well, is seeing ourselves as pastors before we see ourselves as Christians. And when it's the other way around, well, so what if things fall apart? Jesus, it's your church. These are your people. You can minister to them more effectively than I can. So anyways, that's some of my reflections.
Yeah, thank you. And the last question I asked, and we're not going to take time because we've got to move on here, but what is one step you can take to decentralize your leadership? And so hopefully you've thought about that and come up with some practical things that might be possible for you to do. So let's take a look at some stuff that I want us to do today. So we're gonna let's dig in a little deeper then to this whole centralization, decentralization discussion. And if you were with us, Madera, and I think you all were, we talked about the centralized church and how it's really formed around the worship experience, that our Sunday morning gathering is the prime identity piece for our congregation, and then everything else flows out of that. And typically, in a general sense, it's small groups. Now, in an ideal world, it looks beautiful like this, nice and kind of somewhat symmetrical and even. Reality is, though, often our churches look more like this, or even more cumbersome than that. We've got maybe some small groups, maybe we've got some mid-sized groups that flow off the center. And you'll notice I even have some circles there that don't have any lines attached to the center. We often have like separate silos that exist that aren't really integrated well into the life of the church. We have some people that are even so closer and some farther away from the center. It's a little messier than what the diagrams might look like, but the point is, it still boils down to everything flows out of that Sunday morning worship experience. Again, I'm not at all saying we shouldn't worship, or that we shouldn't have those gatherings, but is that sufficient, both as an identity for the congregation and as a vehicle for ministry? And some of the things, and some of this I shared in Madeira, but I just want to review this briefly, is so I think there are three major issues that I see with the centralized church. I think one is growth limits. If the pastor is the one, because ultimately, if it does boil down to the worship service, then it becomes pastor centric, and you have limits then as to how you can grow, because it's all based on the resources that you can pour into that Sunday morning experience. And so there's a growth limit, but there's also a limited span of care. And span of care is really important, because as people feel included and welcomed and wanted and loved, they're going to stick with the church. If suddenly the church grows to a point that they don't feel that love and care and support, then they get restless. And we see that a lot, where one of the reasons why many of our churches get stuck, and most churches never even get past 75, if they even reach that, is because you start hitting a point where the span of care is diminished. And again, people don't, wake up one morning and go, well, I don't have enough span of care. I mean, they're not thinking this necessarily, but they're feeling it. And then they're just getting restless. And then when some new shiny object church comes along, they go over there because that church appears to fulfill their need, at least on the short term. And then when they get restless there, then they move on. And, it's just part of the whole circulation of the saints. One of my, if you ever, I don't know, Malcolm and Aaron, if you're Canadian background, if you ever run across Reginald Bibby. Reginald Bibby was the professor of sociology at the University of Lethbridge, and probably up until maybe 15 years ago was probably the preeminent religious sociologist in Canada, and wrote some amazing books. One of his books, Fragmented Gods, that was written like 35 years ago, shaped me tremendously. And I got to be in a master's seminar with him at one point, and amazing. The guy had amazing insight. So he coined this phrase, circulation of the saints, and among a few other interesting phrases that are unique to him. But I've always thought about that. You got this, people get restless and they run around to whichever church meets their needs. And then there's also resource limits, that when there's so much energy put into the centralization, you can do that as long as there's money available. But if and other resources, but when those dry up, suddenly it becomes really difficult. We have a congregation in our district, small church, probably at this point 30, 40 people, but they have extreme financial resources. I mean, there's got to be people in that church that must be, that are making tremendous money, because this little church has like 4 staff, and they can put on for their size, a pretty good worship service and all, but it's all comes down to they've got the resources. But many of our churches, man, if they're 30, 40 people, wow. That's tough stuff. And so when you hit those resource limits, and suddenly in a centralized church, you hit the wall. And so, and again, I went through this in Madeira, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it today, but just to reiterate, to remind us. So there are many times throughout history, church history, and I have 18th century listed here, but even prior to that, we could even look at the whole monastic movement and other things like that emerged, where there was always a recognition there had to be more than just this centralized church experience, either as a worship service or in terms of its structure and governance. And so for us, I think in the 18th century, John Wesley, Methodism, there's tremendous insights that we can gain from that, where he was doing this 300 years ago, and very, very innovative for his time. And then the Church of God movement that we're part of, I don't think we appreciate enough how they were pushing the limits on some of this stuff. Now, unfortunately, we got swept into the pressure to be like the others. When I think of the Church of God, I often think of when the children of Israel were in the land of Canaan, and they were trying to take it over, but there were a number of times where Scripture talks about how they were almost envious and jealous of what their pagan neighbors had and were doing, and so they wanted to adapt and take on those things themselves. I think Church of God did that to a certain extent. We saw all the other Christian groups, evangelical groups in particular, that we had some affinity toward, and we looked at, well, man, they can do that. They can put up nice buildings, and they can have a full-time pastor, and so we wanted those things too. We weren't content just to be our loose band of rabble rousers, but we were certainly a part of that. So, one of my slides went missing. Okay, that doesn't matter. The other one that was supposed to be in there was 20th century, the whole small group movement, where as churches got larger, and that, especially in the 20th century, became very prominent, that churches started getting much, much larger, that it was recognized that we had to break people into smaller groups, and the whole small group movement erupted as a result of that. And that started somewhere in the 30s and 40s, really took place after World War II, and then in the 70s just mushroomed. Okay, but beyond that, so let's just talk about this for a bit. We can talk about the history of everybody else, but what is your history? Has your church attempted to decentralize at any point? Let's just talk about that for a few minutes. We've got not long, but just a few minutes here. How has your church attempted to decentralize? And I ask the questions why or why not. Maybe you haven't. Are there some reasons why maybe it's been considered, but never really took place? So let's just talk about that for a few minutes. Anybody want to throw in any comments to that effect?
Just real quick, Lloyd, after I think we did try about 2008 to 2010, probably when Jim had come here, Beasler. Jim tried to do that decentralized, and everybody they quit. They just stopped coming. So after Jim said, then Jim gave up after about 2010, around there. He said that I just can't do this.
So what was he doing? I mean,
what he did was he broke off. He changed the whole worship. Not just what you talked about worship earlier. He changed the whole format and everything. Like, he came in here and he says, we did worship, but after that, instead of having like the regular, like the whole church, the sermon, and the whole idea, he took it off and he says, I want you this, you four, and you four, and you four. I want you to go to that classroom, and I want you five to go to that classroom, and I want you to go to that class. And then come back and here's your subjects. And he would do that. You take a leader from each group, and you put them in the rooms, and come back in about 20 minutes. And then we'll talk about what we all talked. And they said, no, that's not church. We're not going to do that. And he tried to do that for about 4 or 5 months, and eventually it just got down to nobody would come anymore. And so when that happened, and then Jim left, and they asked me to do what I'm doing now, and they said, if you do that, we're not going to come back. So it's sort of like, that's why we sort of, and when I say decentralized, and in a way, what I meant was Jim wanted that this process where people would actually come, take a little more responsibility during a Sunday service, a little more participation in it, and they just
Which is a
would have
small
it.
step. It's not the
No,
it's not like going
it's-
full
but-
decentralization, but it's one of the steps toward that.
Well,
yeah.
it is, Lloyd. Yeah, even during worship, Jim had a very musical family, and he would bring them here, and they do all the stuff and the music and whatever it was. And I don't know if you and the boys went through this here, but they were given they went into these file cabinets here with all the music, and they said, these are the songs that we sing. We don't sing those songs. So you know that it's a conversation, I'm sure. And so that's when Jim says, that's, and see, he tried to do things that would just more or less get the congregation involved. And once he did that, I said they just weren't willing to go along with it. And that's why not? And that's part of the reason, because it's sort of and almost to me, it's like, man, I'm sort of, now I can do it now. I know I can do it now. Because there's not much left now. I can do it. But at that time, we still had, a significant amount of people coming. I was afraid to go down that road because I was only licensed. I wasn't ordained or anything yet. So I didn't want to go down that road. So it was very difficult time that we had to go.
Yeah. So Aaron, what about Tulare? What has there been, what is the history there of any attempts to decentralize?
They did small groups before I was here. And then when we got here, the small groups were still functioning, but they acted more like cliques, and they faded. So that had happened. I think that was a leadership issue within each small group. And from my understanding in Saskatchewan, with the family sort of oriented or the mission homes, those faded as well. And they attempted them, and a lot of them ended up failing in their first year. So that had happened. And then during COVID, we were forced to decentralize. And if we would have kept going in that direction, I believe we wouldn't have a church today. I think it would be gone. Yeah. Because it was born out of necessity like everyone else. And what we saw right away was the friendships and all of that just disappeared, just gone. The relationships broke apart. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's very interesting you said that, Aaron, because first when we started out, and we had to shut the church down, and during COVID, you're right, absolutely right. And it was, we got Zoom, we got this, we're gonna get together online. Well, that lasted for a couple of months, and then after that, it's not the same. No matter what people say, it's not. They like to be together, and and I think COVID did a lot of damage to even to a small church like this. It did a lot of damage. People say, well, we don't really need to meet each other. It's not, that relationship isn't there. Maybe and then some of them, like they said, maybe it never was, and that's where they've been hurt.
Well, and I think one of the observations that I would have on the whole COVID experience is I think for churches that already had a strong, healthy, decentralized model going into COVID, they did fine. But COVID is not the time to start implementing that.
No,
I mean, you out of necessity, you're right. You end up trying these things, and for a while that was good, and everybody thought COVID was just going to be a 6-week thing, and it turned out to be much longer. But that COVID was not the time, and I think that's what a lot of churches are discovering, and I think are going to discover if they haven't already, is that a lot of the shifts and changes they've made will probably not stick post-COVID, because those were not born out of strategy and intent and buy-in. They were done purely out of necessity. When you do stuff out of necessity, it's going to be so easy then later when things go back to normal to put that aside and assume that we can do it the way we used to do it. Yeah. Okay. So here's your assignment for next week. So I'm like I say, next week we're gonna get into more detail. We'll work on we'll start working on the social, I mean not the social, but the spaces stuff. And but I wanted us to kind of just make sure we're on track with thinking about some of these core issues, both last time on leadership and centralization, and just generally of centralization versus decentralization models. So if you could draw out, and at minimum, if you don't want to share it with us, again, nobody's going to have a gun to your head on this, but it'd be cool if you could draw out a simple diagram of your church life and share it with us. Now, sharing it with us might be tricky. We'd have to, you could hold up a piece of paper to your camera. That isn't always pretty. If you think of it, you could send me an email, send a diagram it, either take a picture of it, or if you actually create it on your computer, send the file. But it would be great to share these a little bit next time, just as a discussion point, just to be honest, say, here's what we look like. And, you might have a very simple diagram. I don't need it to be overly complicated, but I think the purpose of it is for your own benefit. And also, as we learn from each other, I think there could be a lot of value in just saying, hey, they're in the same boat that I am, or they're doing some things like we're trying to do here, blah, blah, blah. So if you could do that, I think that could be really helpful, just to diagram it out and look at the kind of the key, well, it just comes down to sometimes programs or key ministries. It could be key leaders. There's different aspects that you could throw into a diagram. Again, this isn't an organizational chart, but it's more to look at it from where do things flow and where are things centered, and where are the at least in the this isn't what's in your bylaws. This is how it really lives out. This is how our church really, really functions. And my guess is, for most of you, it's going to be that worship experience is going to be the center, and then everything is going to flow out of that. But you might have some small groups, mid-sized groups. You might have some siloed groups. But for your own benefit, take some time and draw it out. And even if you don't share it, I think just to go through that experience will help you identify, because I don't think you can change any of this until you first begin to identify it and really have insights as to what is going on. You have to know your current reality before you can start changing it. So if you think of it, if you want to send me, I don't care if it's on PowerPoint or a JPEG or it's a scanned image, whatever it might be, send me and I'll incorporate it into my PowerPoint deck next week, and be interesting to have you share some of it, just again, so we can learn from each other, not to be critical, because we're all trying to help each other. Every single one of us, myself included, we're trying to figure this out. We're trying to make sense of it. And we also know that we have to retrain ourselves. We have to retrain our thinking. I just came across an amazing article. If any of you want, probably most of you don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, or maybe not even aren't even on Twitter, but I just tweeted a link to an article by Greg Boyd. I'm not a big Greg Boyd fan, but some stuff he does I really appreciate. And he wrote an article a month ago, and I just came across a fascinating article on talking about, and I don't know if any of you, how many of you are into Bonhoeffer and are familiar with some of Bonhoeffer's thinking of religionless Christianity and all this kind of stuff. But Boyd made an amazing article and basically saying how, and I think it tied in really well to Holy Week, which is why I retweeted it, is that he was saying that, and I forget the exact quote, I don't have it in front of me, but something to the effect of, we have to die to religion in order to find new life in Christ. And using some death and resurrection motifs in there, but it's a long article. If you get a chance to read it, I think you'd find it to be very fascinating. But what it does say is we've got to rethink what we're going to do, and we can't experience the rebirth, the renewal, the revival that we're looking for if we keep trying to do it the way we've been doing it. And so I think it's important that we are willing to allow God to take us maybe into new places that might even be uncomfortable for us. And so hopefully this discussion will aid that. So Michael, with that, I will turn it back to you.
Awesome. Great stuff. I love listening into this conversation. I'm keeping my voice out just because of my current context, but there's so much history that, I'm thinking of from the identity stuff that you talked about, Lloyd. I get that. In fact, I don't know that I've heard somebody share it quite the way that you did, because it resonated a lot with my story. I was in one context with so much favor that I didn't think about the way that I might be in the center of things. And then when it was retracted in the next situation, there were a lot of wrestling matches there. So really good stuff. And then I think too, just as I hear with both the other guys, a lot of times the culture of the existing church, like the historical culture of it, you confront that invisible entity and you bump up against it and you may not know what it is. And so it takes oftentimes a couple of bruises, a couple broken, appendages even, to go, oh, that's what's going on right there. And can be really difficult to be able to deal with. So I will get that follow-up email out, send it up, and then we'll be back on next week. Thanks, guys, for being here. Dayton does send his apologies. He said he's just swamped with Holy Week and some mother-in-law duties that he's got this week. And so we'll see you guys next time. All right. Bless you guys.
Good. Hey, I'm going to just let you know, you guys, I'm going to be in California from Wednesday to the following Friday. So I'm going to be there about a week and a half. So, and I'm also part of that be at the Church of God Regional Convention in Fremont. But hey, maybe we'll even
love it.
Maybe be able to connect possibly in some other ways with you guys. So anyways, take care.
That's good. Hey, and Aaron and Malcolm, I'll send you guys a message about that stuff that I need some help with in Dinuba, just to see what will work. Take care, guys.
Yeah.